Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into something pretty wild. We are neutrally unpacking a deeply traditionalist yet surprisingly structural framework that completely reimagines relationship dynamics. We're going to explore how some folks are synthesizing ancient biblical theology with modern corporate business models to rethink marriage from the ground up. And our core focus today is going to be on a highly provocative concept, the idea that in a truly functional structure, the husband must carry literally 100% of the ultimate liability. It's a fascinating deep dive into a worldview that pushes back hard against modern cultural shifts, so let's jump right in.
To kick things off, I want you to consider a mechanical problem. What actually happens when a perfectly equal modern 50-50 marriage hits a major, completely unresolvable disagreement? Modern culture absolutely loves the idea of a 50-50 split, right? I mean, it sounds fair, it sounds equal, it sounds noble. But structurally speaking, the sources argue this creates a massive mechanical problem the very second a genuine deadlock occurs.
So here's our roadmap for today's explainer. We'll hit the 50-50 deadlock, the cosmic chain of command, the limited partnership model, the burden of 100% liability, the shielded interior economy, and finally, noblesse oblige and trust.
All right, kicking things off with Section 1, the 50-50 marriage deadlock. There's this brilliant quote from the sources that perfectly illustrates the flaw. A committee of two has no tiebreaker. It really hits the nail on the head. Everything looks amazing on paper when you're just splitting bills and chores, but nothing is ever truly settled because nobody's actually in charge of the final call. Think about the last time you and a partner couldn't agree on where to eat. Now multiply that by, say, an out-of-state job offer or a massive financial crisis. When you have two completely equal heads trying to make one unified decision and they genuinely disagree, the entire system just freezes.
Because you've eliminated a designated tiebreaker, it creates a total vacuum of leadership. Decisions aren't won by logic or reason, they're won by pure attrition. It becomes a grueling test of who can keep arguing until 2 in the morning. And sure, maybe that works fine for everyday choices. But when zero-sum life events occur, situations where you literally cannot do both things at once, the relationship turns into an exhausting endurance battle rather than a true partnership.
Moving right along to Section 2, the cosmic chain of command.
So how does this traditionalist worldview solve the 50-50 deadlock? Well, they introduce a strict, unyielding, top-down authority structure. Drawing heavily on historical texts, this framework argues that marital hierarchy isn't just some cultural accident. It's seen as a direct reflection of a massive cosmic blueprint established before time began. Authority flows strictly downward, step by step, and breaking any single link throws the entire cosmic order into chaos.
This all ties directly into a concept known as federal headship. Tracing this all the way back to the book of Genesis, federal headship is essentially representative liability. Even though Eve ate the fruit first, who did God come looking for? Adam. Why? Because Adam was the appointed representative. When the system fails, the head gets audited, regardless of who made the localized mistake. It's the ultimate "the buck stops here" scenario, proving that the man carries the non-transferable burden of authority.
Which brings us to Section 3. The limited partnership model.
Now this is where things get really fascinating. The sources actually take these ancient theological concepts and seamlessly merge them with modern corporate structures. They argue that a marriage functions perfectly as a limited partnership. In the corporate world, a general partner has complete operating authority, but in exchange, they hold total, unlimited personal liability. If the business tanks, they take the hit entirely. The limited partner, on the other hand, holds equity and governance, but is completely shielded from those external liabilities. So why does the general partner get the final say? Simply because they are legally destroyed if the enterprise fails. That liability is the structural check on their power.
And that pushes back hard on the modern idea that marriage is purely a spiritual or emotional covenant, right? The sources assert it is simultaneously a serious enterprise, a binding contract where strict terms are exchanged. Treating it like a high-level corporate partnership actually provides the rigid structure needed to survive life's hardest challenges.
And that leads us perfectly into Section 4, the burden of 100% liability, which is really the core focus of our explainer today.
You see, in this framework, being the general partner is absolutely not a free pass to just boss people around. It's about paying for authority with total accountability. The sources break the husband's role down into a fourfold mandate from the ancient Hebrew Torah: prophet, priest, king, and warrior. Just look at the immense weight of this. If he fails to proclaim truth as the prophet, he is held legally accountable. As priest, he alone bears the heavy liability for spiritual negligence. As king, he's judged for any chaos under his roof. And as the warrior defending the perimeter, if a threat gets through,
The blood of the household is strictly required at his hand.
There's a powerful quote from the sources that sums this up. The higher the seat, the heavier the load. The king eats last and bleeds first. Think about what that actually means in practice. You don't get to pass the buck. You never get to blame your spouse for a bad outcome. And you definitely can't claim, well, we decided this together to escape the fallout. Your liability is 100%. Authority here isn't about demanding submission. It is paid for directly by taking on the heaviest burdens yourself.
All right, let's pivot to Section 5, the shielded interior economy.
So if the husband is out there managing the dangerous perimeter with full 100% liability, where does that leave the wife's role? Operating as the limited partner, her role is highly distinct and, honestly, incredibly powerful. Ancient Hebrew uses terms like ezer kenegdo and eche chayil, which translate to a warrior ally, an equal matching counterpart, a woman of valor, force, and deployed physical power. The sources make it crucial to separate being structurally subordinate in role from being subordinate in value. The role just dictates who answers for the final call. She remains fully equal in human worth and dignity.
Because she's completely shielded from that external liability of the general partner, the wife has the protected freedom to successfully govern the entire interior economy of the estate. Think of it like a chief operating officer who runs the company internally with massive autonomy, while the CEO assumes the external liability. Drawing on Proverbs 31, she's an executive engine, managing supply chains, real estate, establishing day-to-day operations. She doesn't have to constantly look over her shoulder at the external perimeter, so she can operate with immense force within her shielded domain.
Which brings us to our final part, Section 6, Noblesse oblige and trust.
Now, you might be wondering, how does this strict top-down model not just immediately devolve into toxic tyranny? Without trust, the whole thing collapses. Well, the system relies entirely on the historical concept of noblesse oblige, meaning nobility obligates. Legally, this equates to a fiduciary duty. Put simply, you are legally obligated to act in the other person's best interest, not your own. The general partner must consistently prioritize the household above his personal comfort or ego. If he acts selfishly, he breaks the fundamental contract of the marriage. And to completely avoid that 50-50 attrition trap we discussed earlier, the sources lay out a very strict three-step protocol for disagreements. Step 1. The husband must listen and steelman her arguments, meaning he understands her perspective so deeply he could argue it flawlessly himself. Step 2. He acts as the tiebreaker, making the final decision visibly and firmly. And Step 3, and this is the ultimate payoff for why 100% liability exists, he must completely own the consequences. If he makes the call and it's wrong, he eats the blame completely. No relitigating, no I told you so, he absorbs the fallout. But, and this is an incredibly explicit caveat from the sources, coercion, fear tactics, or intimidation, those instantly invalidate the entire structure. In this model, you do not demand authority, you assume responsibility. Demanding submission without picking up the heaviest burdens first completely breaches the covenant. If a man abandons the perimeter defense, he forces his wife to drop her shield and take on the liability herself, which inevitably destroys the structural integrity of the home.
So, as we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a pretty paradigm-shifting question to ponder based on all this material. Does importing a corporate structure with a designated general partner carrying 100% liability destroy the romance of a relationship? Or, by completely removing the exhausting friction of the 50-50 deadlock and ensuring someone assumes total responsibility, is it actually the structural key to saving it? It is for sure a fascinating lens through which to view how structure, authority, and tiebreakers operate in our modern lives. Thanks so much for joining me on this deep dive, and keep exploring these ideas.